please welcome the fantastic director of Creature, also of Amy and Senna. I'm sure many of you have seen those as well. Asif Kapadia, everybody.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Thanks for coming.
So, I mean, tell me about the decision to shoot a ballet, because I think you were not a fan of the ballet, it's fair to say.
I'd never been.
Right.
I'd never been. I mean, for me, I got a call. It was all during lockdown. I was working on something. I got a phone call saying that the English National Ballet had been working on this show for a couple of years with the choreographer Akram Khan, who previously had been here with a show, actually. And the dancers had prepared the show and then they couldn't perform it. They weren't allowed to be in front of audiences because of COVID. And it'd been cancelled a few times and the show may never have been performed. So I got a call and someone said, look, there's a 2-week window, literally 10 days, where the dancers are available. Would you be interested in doing something? And at the time, we were in full lockdown. I live in London. The English National Ballet are based in East London. And they were like, maybe you could go out on the streets and shoot a short film or do something. I went along to a rehearsal, watched Akram working with the dancers with this kind of mad, intense soundtrack. And I found it really powerful. And I thought, why don't we just try and adapt it into a movie? So if the show never happens, at least there was a film. And so, yeah, we had 10 days. And my previous feature film, Senna and Amy, it's not unusual for me to spend 3 years or so making a movie. And I had 5 days preparation, 10 days with the dancers, and about 15 days to edit. My editor, Sylvie, lives in Paris. I never met her. So we were like editing via WhatsApp. And we basically just made it into a movie. And then it was actually months and months later, nearly a year later, that the show came out at Sadler's Wells.
That is incredible. I mean, just 5 days of preparation to get all of that, to choose what you wanted to do, presumably. I mean, you have some handheld camera, so I guess you had a little bit of room for looseness, but you've also got to coordinate with a lot of dancers. Yeah,
what I tried to do was to not just do a classical representation of a stage where, you know, the camera stays far away. Normally, if you go to the theatre, you go to dance or ballet or contemporary dance, there's an orchestra pit, say. So the cameras are always, you know, like they are now, they're away from the actual performers. Because this was filmed at the English National Ballet's rehearsal space, there was no orchestra pit. So I sat on the floor here, looking up at the dancers, and I watched the whole thing in close-up initially, rather than normally when you watch a show, you might be somewhere in the auditorium and you see a wide shot. So I just thought, if I do make this into a film, let's make it with close-ups. Let's be in there between the dancers, next to the dancers, and make it a bit of a crossover between fiction and a live show. And so that was a key thing that we were able to do. And then with the dancers and my brilliant camera crew, to kind of, in a way, become a part of the choreography, to be in there between the dancers, around the dancers, to look back at the kind of black hole where the audience normally would be, to look through the set, from above the set, be inside the dance at times. So yeah, that was the idea, was to kind of break it up a bit as much as we could, because we had the opportunity.
What did that mean for the dancers in terms of their performances? I mean, did they have to sort of change what they do? Obviously, they have to make space for you, I guess, in the middle. But
well, yeah, cameras are big lumps of metal, so you have to be very careful. And I mean, dancers, ballet dancers, all dancers are just incredible athletes. They're incredible humans. And so what they do is, obviously, they normally would do 45 minutes. They do everything in one go. They do one act, then there's a break, and then there's act 2. And the big thing about filmmaking is it's all stop-start. You're trying to pick up different shots, different moments, coverage, as we would call it, a close-up or a close-up or a 2-shot. Or you ask them to do it again. You do take 2 or take 3. And that was unusual for them. You know, everything in dance is in sync with music. So the music came first. They have to hear the music. They hear the music normally very loud, so they feel it, and then they dance to music. And because there's no script, right? The music is the screenplay. That's how they remember where to be. So the challenge was to break it into sequences of music, and then essentially I was told by Akram, the choreographer, they're allowed to do 2 takes. So we had 2 takes of anything, and then I had a group of cameras that I would move around between the 2 takes in order to figure out how we could then edit it later on. So we kind of filmed it live, but with a couple of takes where we were allowed to say, can we do this? Okay, let's do it one more time. And then as we got more confident, I was like, well, what if we put the camera in between the dancers, and then they're just so amazing. They would go, okay, we'll change the choreography, give us 5 minutes, they'd figure it out, and they'd always hit their mark, knowing there's a camera just here.
That's amazing. I mean, obviously, they're pretty good dancers.
They're like
the
greatest dancers in the world. Jeffrey, the lead dancer, is like really special, really amazing presence. Yeah.
He's an incredible actor as well. I mean, that is a proper acting performance.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Akram basically directs the dancers like a movie director. So our worry with the cameraman, I remember one of our first conversations was like, a lot of dancers are amazing from the neck down. But like, if you put a camera on their face like you would do in a movie, what do they do? What if there's nothing there? And Jeffrey, and because he's an amazing performer and actor and dancer, and Akram, the director, in a way, when he directs them on a show, he does so much detail in a lot of their work and their hands and their gestures and everything, which I kept thinking, if I was in the back of the auditorium, I would never see. I would just see the one wide shots. I thought, okay, we're going to stick the camera in there to show this up close on a cinema screen.
To show how good they are, basically.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about you working with Akram, because traditionally the director is the guy. He's the big cheese in film, and in ballet the choreographer is the big cheese.
God. Yeah.
So how do you,
it's not too good to have two directors on set.
Yeah.
So Akram was definitely the boss, right? He created the show, and then my job was to turn it into a film in the short amount of time that I had. But then the challenge is, when I have a question or I'm like, what is that moment about? What are we trying to say? Because when you're looking at a stage show, there may be something happening on the corner of the stage there. There's a group over there. There's a close-up bit of action there. And if I go in close, you're not going to see the amazing group of dancers over there. So I picked what I thought was interesting to me, I suppose. Akram was very good. He said really up front, it's your show. You make the film, the live show's a live show. It's your film. Do what you want. So that was helpful. Also, he basically didn't turn up when we filmed, which meant it was less painful for him, I think. And then he works with assistant directors who I would work with. So one of his assistants works with the principal dancers, so I would deal with them for the principal dancers, and one of them works with a group. And so that became the kind of triangle between the camera crew, the director, and the choreographer. And then I would, if I wanted to change something, I'd run it by Akram. And then he'd come in and he'd say, okay. And then I think he got into, Akram does like movies. He likes cinema. He's really into film. So I think it became an interesting kind of collaboration of learning along the way for all of us. The honest truth is, because it was COVID, it's the only film that I've made where myself and the choreographer, the main creative, and the dancers, we had, like, literally, we never had lunch, we never had breakfast, we never sat together, we never spoke before we made the film, because we were all social distancing still. After we made the film, when we did Q&As, I'd be like, someone would ask me a question, I'd go, Akram, what the hell is it about? And then he'd go, well, this is what I thought it was about. For him, it's like, it's all a metaphor, you can do whatever you want. With a movie, you normally have to answer kind of questions like, why is that there? Why is that there? So I learned after we made the film what a lot of it was saying.
So what's it about?
Of course, we all have our own interpretation, obviously, yeah.
So what is it about?
Well, I don't know. When I first saw it, right, I thought it was about authoritarian regimes. I thought it's about this group of people that are coming in and kind of fascism. Other people have seen it and said it's about colonialism. How these people come in, they invade, they take advantage of everyone, they kind of rape and pillage and leave on a rocket. Someone else, Akram said maybe it's based on Trump and Elon Musk. Someone else saw it and said it's Harvey Weinstein, who sort of promises, I'll give you an Oscar if you do what I want you to do. So essentially it's about power and how corrupt power can be corrupt, is my reading of it. But the honest truth is, I've done loads of Q&As now, and everyone has a different take, and that's absolutely fine. Some people see a story. I've seen it so many times. I see a story, and I see characters, and I see repetition and links. But other people seeing it the first time may not see any story, and hopefully you just see some good dancing, at the least.
And just seeing movement like that is also incredible.
Dark. I mean, it's quite dark piece, and that was one of the things. And I asked him about some of the darker moments, particularly, what happens to the female character. And that's where Akram, it's only because I asked him, he said, I have all of these themes, but he said, everything I make is personal. So he grew up in an abusive household. So he says, because, when the female character, Marie, when the man goes to her, one of my friends said, it's a weird relationship. Is it like love, or is it a maternal relationship? What's going on there? The idea that he wants always for her to put her hand on his head is a weird, and because my friend asked the question, I asked Akram, and he said, yeah, that's my mum. So he's like Creature at home, and then Marie's like his mum. And the kind of other character, the Major, is his father. So there's all this personal stuff that he then puts in his choreography, which is then based, in theory, it was started off with Frankenstein, then it became Wojciech, and there's other kind of classical text in there, but in the end, a lot of it is like his personal experiences hidden in the choreography, which is kind of dealing with his dirty linen in a way.
And the music of the piece, I mean, because we're at Glastonbury, we should talk music. You know, it incorporates classical themes, it incorporates obviously bolero, things like that, but also were all those sound effects and so on there on stage and all that kind of distortion almost?
Yeah, so Vincenzo La Manga is Akram's kind of regular collaborator. So he's this crazy Neapolitan who basically wants to sort of fuck up the orchestra. So he's making them play at times out of tune or making them do things they're not comfortable with. I think Akram and Vincenzo are very interested in messing around with classical ballet and trying to make people uncomfortable. You know, that is part of it. And so Akram, for example, you know, the principal cast are all Asian. Very rarely do you see in classical ballet Asian characters playing the leads. So that was the other thing that I read into it, kind of the colonial thing. And then Vincenzo was making this amazing kind of 50-piece orchestra all play slightly off, which they kind of pushed back against, but that was the idea. But it also is mixed with sound design. And then when you see the film version, when we shot the film, there was no sync sound. It was only the music playing really loud. So I don't know how well you could hear it in here. I did ask him to turn it up. But there's a lot of kind of sound effects and breathing and the material and footsteps, and all of the other stuff was done in post, all afterwards. Yeah, so all of the sound design's created in post.
I was going to ask about the Foley, because I noticed it particularly in those last few scenes, like the your body hitting the floor and things like that.
Yeah, none of that existed because, and then it ends up feeling very music video-like. So the idea for me was to bring you close to the dancers. You have to hear them. In order to feel them, you have to hear them. And it's like the same principle I did when I did Diego Maradona or my other docs, where you kind of do every footstep or every kick of the ball or something. We did the same principle, and the same team did this, where you had to basically put in every footstep, every breath, every bit of material to make you feel like you're next to a dancer.
It's amazing because a bunch of reviews I read compared it to a silent movie in ways, in terms of, I guess, people are trying to communicate everything just through body movement.
I mean, absolutely, I would say it's kind of pure cinema. It's performance and music and photography. And like that is silent movies, you know, there is a narrative, but it's all we did think about at points like, should we put cards up like a silent movie to kind of give you the chapters so you understand what it's about, but in the end we decided just go through it and see how it plays.
It does feel in the end like it shares some DNA with the documentaries you've done. There is an element of just capturing something real and in an interesting way and putting it on film. Did it feel familiar when you did it, or did it feel like completely different?
It was a kind of meeting of drama and telling a story with the idea of being there and seeing what happens and capturing it. So it was somewhere in the middle of the two, as well as kind of essentially, it's art, you know, it's a work, it's an art form. Ballet is considered an art form, classical music is an art form, cinema is also art, but also it can be challenging and uncomfortable as well, you know. So that was kind of the idea. It is difficult to take at times, but that was the intention of Akram. And then my job is to kind of follow that through when I make a film, so yeah.
And what about adding in the sort of the external elements? You know, I don't know if there was a screen at the ballet. I haven't seen it live, sadly, but you know, the things like the rocket taking off, the outdoor shots.
That was just me, kind of thinking like, should I start in that room? Because essentially, it's a film in one location. It's an entire show that takes place in this box, and so I just had a feeling. My first instinct when they pointed was this idea. Somewhere in there's also this idea of climate and the kind of destruction on a planet and the environment. So the idea that it's all kind of flooding or water levels are rising and sea levels are rising, so they're going to leave the planet, which is again very much like Elon Musk and all of these kind of billionaires, Jeff Bezos, they all like screw everything up and then we'll fly on a spaceship somewhere. So I kind of thought I'm just going to put in some kind of slightly literal kind of visual images to kind of help. But that, again, that's my reading. But I like the idea of it starting outside of that space. You end up in that room. I've stolen some footage from an old film that I did in the Arctic. So when he gets thrown out of that space, he ends up in the Arctic. So I actually shot that in the North Pole. So yeah, I kind of put in a few visual things to kind of just break it out. But essentially, everything else is shot in one cube.
And just before I open it up to the audience a little bit, but I wanted to ask, was there a moment that was particularly difficult to capture? Was there something that you thought, we've got to get this bit right?
I mean, I can tell you what happens when you're shooting. Things go wrong, and you just have to manage it. So we've got 10 days to shoot a 2-hour show. I've made the film shorter than a live show. I've kind of cut about 15 minutes to tighten it up, and it's one act, not 2 acts. What happened was on day one of the shoot, just as we were about to begin, somebody in one of the bubbles tested positive, right? And there was somebody that tested positive that was part of the bubbles of the group of dancers. So I don't know how many there are now in the film. Maybe they say there's 20. Originally there were 30. And they'd worked on his show for 2 years, rehearsed it, ready to go, traveled the world, kept getting cancelled, getting ready to go again, got cancelled. We're going to make a movie. One of the bubble tests positive. So we have a decision to make. What do we do? Wait for the next test? Do we hang around? I'm like, I've only got 10 days to shoot the whole thing. Who is in the bubble? And there were like 6 or 7 dancers, I think it was. So I was like, are they still in the room? They're like, yeah, they need to leave. They need to leave the room. So having rehearsed it for 2 years, they had to leave the room while they were tested again. We started shooting. Akram and his team re-choreographed the entire show with like 6 or 7 fewer dancers. And then those 6 and 7 didn't make the film. Because we had to the show has to go on. And so that was like day one. And it's like, what do we do? Do we lose a day waiting for test results, or do we just carry on? And we just had to carry on. So that was all part of the fun of making films at that crazy period of time.
It was, I was on a couple of movie sets during that time, and just the level of testing was insane. Yeah. I mean, necessary, but insane. That's amazing though. Did you shoot in sequence?
Yeah, I mean, what I did in the end was there were 2 acts. So the first week of 5 days, we shot Act 1. Right. Second week, we shot Act 2. Monday, we'd shoot wide shots. Tuesday, we'd pick the first 15 minutes, go in and shoot the hell out of it. Wednesday, shoot the next 15 minutes, shoot the hell out of it. Thursday, the next. And then Friday, some of the kind of fun, kind of crazy shots, or anything that I felt we'd missed. Then we just move on. So I kind of broke it into little pieces. And we just had to make sure we got the bits we needed. And then hopefully Sylvie, our amazing editor who edits all of kind of Luc Besson's films. So she did Leon and Fifth Element, various films like that. She's cut amazing movies. She was in Paris putting it all together. I mean, one of the things that I did on this film, as kind of in answer to your documentary thing, I actually shot all of the rehearsals on my phone and gave all of my phone footage to Sylvie, the editor. So before we officially shot the film, we had edited and shot the film on my phone. And then I showed sequences from the phone to my crew to say, this is the sequence we're going to shoot today, because most of the crew didn't see a rehearsal. They had no idea what was going to happen. And then they had to follow these dancers doing these incredible things at full speed, and we only had 2 takes. So the script became my phone version of the show, which we would give out to everyone every morning, say, this is the section we're shooting. So they had an idea. So yeah, I used the kind of documentary way of working with Archive to basically edit the film before we actually officially shot the film. So then we knew what we were shooting, we knew the length, we knew roughly what happened, and then we reshot it properly with a proper crew.
That's amazing. Do we have any questions in the audience? I have my lovely assistant Rich over here with the microphone. He will be right with you, so everybody can hear you.
Basically, well, I watched Amy for Film Studies A-level, so this is like full circle. I got a D, but it doesn't matter. Basically, what I wanted to ask was, because I come from a theatre and dance background, and obviously you stated earlier you'd never seen the ballet before. So I wanted to know how, since filming this and editing it, what have you, how has your context on theatre and dance changed, basically?
I mean, my thing is that I've got kind of bad eyesight, right? So I struggle a bit at theatre, and I struggle a bit when I go to somewhere where I have to sit still and I'm far away from the action. And that's kind of one of the reasons I love movies, is I like close-ups and I like being in there, and I'm not a huge fan of intervals either. So if you go to a one-act show, I prefer that. I love being in the moment and kind of going with it. I really learned how incredible dance and choreographers are. So I kind of fell in love with the art form. What I found really hard was going to Sadler's Wells and then seeing the dancers doing other shows. I'm like, this is weird. You know, I'm like, no, you're locked into that performance. You can't do something else. So I found that really quite a struggle, seeing Jeffrey doing something else or some of the other dancers. That's quite weird because I'm so used to them being these characters. But I mean, I've now subsequently been to the ballet. I've been to more like kind of theatre shows. And my intention, I suppose, with the film was I'd never been to the ballet. I saw this show. I thought, if this is what the ballet is, I think I'd watch it. So I thought, if I can make a film where hopefully people who have never been to the ballet might come and see the film, and people who love contemporary dance or love ballet but don't normally go and see kind of docs or go and see kind of independent cinema, we could maybe bring these worlds together. And generally, when I've done Q&As, actually, around the country and in Europe, I normally ask before the film begins, how many people here have been to the ballet before? Hands up. See? Quite a few. How many of you have seen Akram Khan's work before? A few. And anyone seen anything that I've done before? So it's kind of interesting. Wherever I've been, it's sort of that split. It's almost 3/3 of 3 different worlds that meet. So I suppose that was the intention. And so that was the idea, and that's what I've sort of learned. And I really enjoyed working with Akram. I'd love to do more with him. I think he's pretty amazing.
We've got any very quick last questions? I know, do you mean very quick? Okay. I just wanted to ask then, what's next for you? I mean, would you do another one of these? You've just said yes, but have you got another doc in the cooker?
Yeah, I'm in the middle of I was already making a film when this came along, and I was kind of researching it, and I suppose there were themes in this show, which was the reason why I did it. So I feel like almost this film is a bit of a kind of taster in the universe of the film that I'm on, which is quite different. But I'm working on a doc right now, which is set in the future. And it's about if we carry on the way we have been going, say, in the last 10 years, in terms of politically, in terms of the climate, in terms of tech, in terms of everything that's going on, where the hell do we end up if we don't change our path in 50 years? So I'm making a doc set 50 years in the future. And so I've been on that for a few years now, and my editor's still in London, actually. I've just bunked off. I went out to lunch. So don't tell him. So I'm, in the middle of that. I'll be on it till the end of the year. Hopefully it'll come out next year, maybe show it here.
All right, so we'll see you back here next year.
So,
thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you, Asif Kapadia and Creature.
Thank you.